Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to And It's Live, the history of the Premier League. We are just about to get into the action of 1993-94 following last week's summer roundup. And to join me to do that are my two close pals and football time travelling companions. Adam Thornton, how are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. We've had some technical difficulties, but I just want to check this new feature still works. There we go,
There it
see?
does.
Nice little
So
thumbs up for
easily
everyone.
as yeah.
I know. I will do that surreptitiously. Whenever someone makes a good point, it'll be a thumbs up. Yeah, I'm good. That show we do, the first one. I think we were thinking, is that worth it? Can we have that as part of the show? But that's two of them we've done now, and I really enjoy that scene set. A chance for us to see what the predictions were, how we think that's going to work. Just a bit of a digest of the summer. So I'm really enjoying that. But at the same time, getting into these three chronological shows and getting the real football going is what it's all about. So yeah, looking forward to this one.
David, are you suitably excited?
Very much so. I think that I agree with your point, your kind of theory that the Premier League as we know it doesn't really get going until 1996. And I think Euro 96 is such a significant staging post in the history of English football. But to me, that makes these seasons more interesting, and the fact that they are a slight anomaly. Nothing comes out of nowhere, with the exception of the universe, I suppose, with the Big Bang. But there are always things that lead, and much in the same way as the last couple of years of Division 1, I think are really interesting. The first 3 years of the English Premier League I find very fascinating, and I think it is recognisably, by about 96, they're much more certain of what it is, who they are, what its appeal is. And right now, this is an almost hybrid, and I do think there's something fascinating about when an era is ending and another one is beginning. It's very rarely a definitive day. You know, I don't think we can say, and it was on May the 25th, 1995, that it changed. I really get fascinated by that process, that movement from the old to the new.
It's funny, isn't it, though, because the Champions League show that we did, the main event show, like that sort of felt like a bit of a continuation from, for me anyway, from like the late 80s into an era. You had a good team in Barcelona and AC Milan kind of crossing over that span of European Cup to Champions League, and it certainly felt, I don't know, the first, all of the 90s Champions Leagues, it felt like it was hit after hit. A big club appears, they win a league, they win a title, they move away, they win the Champions League, they move away. I like this one. I think, as David said, it's a little bit unloved for a bit. I would agree, absolutely, up until 96. But also, there's not really a crossover team, if you like, because Man United come in and obviously win from now, but they hadn't before, famously. So it is almost like a little reset. But yeah, I like this slow build up that we're having. It's good to get your teeth into it.
Yeah, it's almost like Leeds should have been the side who straddled, and they didn't, because they, you know, as we discovered last week, they completely fell apart the season after winning the title. And I mean, technically you could say that United did, because they were up there and then they won it the following year, but they didn't really. They had to win it, United, to re-enter, because they'd always been up, you know, in that particular area. So no, it's fascinating.
Yeah, these 3 seasons before, I think 95, 96 really is that proper kickoff. The first one, it's the first season. I think a lot of people know quite a lot about it. The third one, because it's Blackburn Rovers, again, a lot of people know quite a bit about it. This one, sandwiched in the middle, I think it's, and I've been guilty of it, I think, in terms of popular memory, quite simple. United have an incredible start, set the pace, don't get pulled back, scoosh. Add a double to that, big talk about a treble. There's a wobble in Europe. We might touch on some of these things as well, but they just pick up what they left off. And that's not really the whole story. There is a point in the spring where there are genuine concerns that this thing is falling apart. And at one stage, an 11-point lead is now goal difference. And my goodness, it's all very much on. And the stories of so many. I mean, I was texting you boys from my son lounge during holidays, just all these stories that were kind of flooding back from 93, 94 that we're going to get into. It's such a rich season. We will start on the opening day then, David. Just a few games to pick up here. But United go to Carrow Road. Anyone who's listening to the last episode of our 92-93 show will know that their 3-1 win there was so influential and important in that final kick in the race to just push on and win the title. But still a difficult ground to go to, still a Norwich team who are also picking up where they left off. They're going to enjoy certainly the start of this season, while still with Mike Walker. And a famous night in Munich and a bit of a European adventure as well. So this is a difficult place with which to kick off the defence, but they kick off in that fashion that we're now starting to become accustomed to. Yeah,
without fuss. They do it in a routine way. Great times for your goals, 25, 26 minutes, and then in the first 15 minutes of the second half, you double it. And you see it out with a minimum of fuss. You play like champions. You go there and you deliver. And what's really interesting to me are the 2 goal scorers in this representing where United are at this point. Because in the first half, you've got Giggs, wonder boy, star boy. For people who maybe only kind of remember Manchester United at the later end of the 90s, where Giggs was almost even then becoming the sort of grizzled old soldier because you had Beckham and you know, there aren't very many people of his age who get superseded by a next generation the way that he did and become part of the furniture as quickly. But Ryan Giggs in 92, 93, 94 was so exciting. You know, the comparisons to George Best were there constantly, the way he played, the way he looked. He was a modern footballer. He was in the front pages of papers and going to the right parties and stuff, but not in that naff way that footballers had done in the 80s. There was no big mullet here. He was not being seen going into kind of shoddy old drinking establishments. He was in the hippest places. And then you've got Brian Robson, the warhorse, the guy who represented basically all of United's ups and downs in the 80s. He was such a perfect embodiment of United in the 80s. The glamour, the swashbuckling nature of play, the inability to last the whole season, the constant injuries every time he seemed to get going. Oh my goodness, that mirrors United in the 80s so much. And here you have him adding to the exciting youngster, the guy who you're thinking, wow, they can pin the future on him. And then the old warhorse in there as well. But I think that there was a sense, even earlier in the season, that Mike Walker, other teams were looking at Norwich because what he'd done the season before was extraordinary. I mean, it really, really was. And he wasn't a known name really before that. He'd been at youth coaching and stuff at Norwich before that. So all of a sudden, people were looking at him and taking notice of him. And they had a really, really good side. You mentioned their Munich. I mean, we'll cover it when we get kind of close to it. But they had such an exciting side, and the way that they played was exciting. And I think what was impressive was United just went there, total banana skin of a fixture on the opening day when everyone's looking and you're the new champions. And they handled it with a maturity. They weren't brilliant. They didn't need to be. That was what was in its own way most impressive.
Yeah. We'll come back to United and their start again shortly, Adam. Just a couple other games in that opening day I want to look at, and we've kind of foreshadowed this in our preview show, but Liverpool are off to a good start. I think we get Sheffield Wednesday at home. 2-0 win, goals in each half, both goals scored by their big signing of the summer, Nigel Clough. They'd win the first 3 games of the season. We'll come back and pick up where they started to go after that. But this looks perfect.
It does, and it'll obviously doesn't become perfect. I think we did speak about Clough, didn't we? In terms of how you can see how that looks like it'll fit. Getting called the new Kenny Dalglish, it's written in the stars, all that jazz. We spoke about those signings alongside Clough that maybe didn't feel like Liverpool signings, shall we say? And yeah, I think the challenge here, like we said, for Liverpool is when you're trying that big reset and you're trying to effectively roll sixes or roll double sixes, if you like, all the time, where we're trying to get back to where we were in the 80s and we're not necessarily cutting corners, but you know what I mean? They're maybe doing things that they wouldn't have done before. They're kind of trying to rush their way to getting back on the perch. It really wouldn't have helped that Man United won the league the year before and then obviously would basically be top all the way through. Certainly, was it game week 3 or something? I think they go top for the second time and stay there. So that's not going to help there. Everton as well. I know we're going to come on to that, but very quietly, top of the table, 9 points out of 9 as well. All of that, I think, must add up for Liverpool, where they're thinking, we've had a good start here, but here's United and here's Everton of all people as well, when we're trying to get ourselves back up. So yeah, not good start for them, absolutely, but it does not end very well as well, and it's a dramatic collapse, as we'll come to. But yeah, I can just see the headlines when Clough gets those 2 on the opening day of the season. Liverpool are back, getting lauded, and it doesn't work out that way.
He scores the following week as well. They go to Queen's Park Rangers and win 3-1. They go to Swindon, newly promoted Swindon, win 5-0. Ruddock scores, McManaman gets a couple, Ronnie Whelan. So again, this blend of experience, toughness, youth, it's all looking pretty glorious. We'll pick that story up later. The third opening day result, David, I want to look at is at Highbury. Now, I'm approaching 45 and my middle-age spread is growing rapidly. However, this crossover between the old First Division and the ultra-professional Premier League, Mickey Quinn scores a hat-trick to beat Arsenal 3-0. This is Coventry City going to Highbury. And I'd fancy myself in a race, is all I'm saying.
It's staggering because there were players who looked like Mickey Quinn in the 80s. Quite a lot of them, if you watch back, even at successful sides. At Everton, I remember in the 80s had John Bailey, who was he had a posterior, quite an impressive one, and that's a very successful Everton side. But most teams could carry a player like that. Jan Molby, of course, famously. I mean, he had supreme ability, but he was a big lad. By 2000, 7 years later, the idea of a player like Mickey Quinn playing in the Premier League is almost laughable. It just simply wouldn't happen. Is it as easy as
John Hartson? Is John Hartson as close to that?
As close, but I think you'd have to say that Hartson, especially in this era, I think he got heavier as he got older. But if you see him actually in his Luton days, he's tall.
Wasn't his nickname? Really. Was his nickname Sumo? Is that the?
Yeah, but Quinn though. One thing about Martin is a player like we talk about players. Nigel Clough could play now, right? Nigel Clough could play in a modern era. In fact, managers would love him. Mickey Quinn couldn't, and it's nothing to do with his physicality, although that would clearly be an issue. It's nothing to do with his body type and his athleticism. It's referees wouldn't allow him to play anywhere close to the way he played and the way he plays here, where he is at his wrecking ball best, where you're not always going to win a fight with that Arsenal backline, right? But there are days that are forward like Mickey Quinn will, and there are days that he won't. This day he wins. It's a proper 70s and 80s number 9 display where Coventry are putting ball after ball into the box and telling him to go challenge for it, and he is loving the contest. But there are elbows coming out. There are running, clearly looking at the defender as he's about to hit the air and running full pelt into him, shoulder first. There's a few spears that wouldn't have been out of place in a wrestling ring. You just simply wouldn't get even close to getting away with that now. But he could finish. And I think that we would be doing him a disservice if we didn't mention that as well. And there's some nice finishing that goes on this day as well.
He's devastating in this game, and he had been in the previous season as well. Coventry had a good old run at it. Also,
that was a way of that. Every team, certainly in the 70s and the early 80s, had that. They had a guy like that. Everton won the league with 2 of them, Andy Gray and Graham Sharpe, although there's much more to the game than that. But the rampaging sort of Hateley-esque number 9 doesn't really come to England until the 90s, and then you get Shearer, who's the sort of leader of it. You could be a big, tall, quite immobile centre-half because the team would entirely play to you. The midfield, they were the runners, and both full-backs would hit diagonals. Both centre-backs would hit diagonals. You'd have wingers who would put the ball, who never came inside. They only ever went on the outside and tried to get a ball into the middle. And you had this huge chap who could go and battle and fight for the ball. This was a massive shock, Martin. I remember the inquest. I remember on Jimmy Hill's Sunday show, in fact, after this, the inquest that went on about this, because I think there was a sense that Arsenal, we mentioned that they'd started the previous season as favourites for the title, and of course hadn't even threatened. They were never really a factor in that title race, but they won both the cups. And there was a sense that, right, okay, they showed that they're winners. It was only consistency was the issue last year. This year they will deliver. And then right on day one, and I also remember this is the heyday of Fever Pitch. Remember the book, which came out in 92, and suddenly if the word Arsenal was said on television, Nick Hornby would be brought in to discuss it. And it's almost a sort of pre-runner to fan media now, really, when you think about it, because here was a guy who's been brought in who was a supporter for his views. He hadn't worked in football, except in this sort of very tenuous way to it, because Fever Pitch is a book about football, but it isn't a book about football also. There's a lot, it's a book about life, and a wonderful book, incidentally. But and I remember him saying the frustration around, because the Arsenal fans really did feel that this was then, last year, okay, but they'd shown they were winners. They won both cups. They'd shown that they knew how to win trophies. And I just don't think the idea of good cup team, it had been labelled at United in the 80s, but I think that there's always a sense that a side who are a good cup team are a bit flighty. And flighty did not fit with George Graham's Arsenal. Solid, dependable, like a good oak desk. And the idea that they were a cup team, which is now, to us, looking back, so obvious and so clear, at the time, just you couldn't put the two together. It just, your brain wouldn't let you.
Just back to Mickey Quinn, I genuinely thought, I think, when I was a kid, that he was the same guy who appeared in the Hellman's mayonnaise advert. Go and have a look at it in the late 80s, because they look similar. We're going to talk about another striker in particular who is slightly different in approach, physique, and also just really the start of possibly the greatest generation of English forwards we've ever seen. We'll pick that up and more after the break. Okay, guys, let's look at Manchester United then. We talked about their start at Norwich. They followed that up, just a one draw, which we'll come back to a wee bit later. A couple of things to pick out then, I guess. And Adam, I'm keen for your thoughts on this. Still in August, but they go to Villa again. One of the three kind of runners that finished the race the season before. This is actually quite an awkward league start for for United. It's a great game, but I think it was Monday Night Football. I think certainly live, but it was superb. Both sides hit the woodwork. United went in front, got pulled back. Daly and Atkinson, more of which probably next week, had equalised. But the man who scores both United goals is Lee Sharpe, who is going to have his best season, I think. How he didn't convert that, did he waste his career? We can probably get into as the weeks go on. But he gets off to a flyer, and I think David touched on it last week, just how cool he was, as well as Giggs and Cantona, and this thing that United were bringing. But he was the one that was going to push Fergie's limits, I think, in terms of off the park discipline and nightlife and whatever else. But by God, on the pitch at this time, he was a flying machine. And it was him that got a vital 3 points on that night.
Yeah, he was. He was someone that, I don't want to say passed me by, but by the time I was thinking about football in the way that I do now, I would say he was gone, to be honest, and he was at Leeds by that point. So it's one of those, you sort of just tag him as very much unfairly as a kind of never was or a has been, because it's not in your peripheral vision, and you're like, oh, he's a waster, for want of a better word. And I don't know if that's too harsh when you look at what he went on to do, and the amount of appearances that he got over the rest of his spell. Yeah, I liked him. I thought this week, we spoke last week about teams that are set up to do a specific thing, like your Blackburns or Newcastle that we're going to come on to. And I think when you see the abundance of riches that Man United have in the wide areas, and obviously will do in a couple of years' time, slightly different, but will do when Beckham comes to the fore. I think it's no surprise that when you have those, it's that sort of whole chicken and egg thing. Are we building a team to because we just want to play in this way, or do we have these players and we're trying to fit them into what we want to do? But whatever happened, it works to a great extent. I thought Sharpe was excellent here, and I think the goal scorer point that you mentioned is one I really want to dive into, because there's a lot of goals in this season, early doors in particular. But in fact, just as a comparison, I was checking earlier on, and Cantona's hat trick for Leeds last season was, I don't know, maybe game week 3 or something. It was still in August. That was the only hat trick before Halloween in that season. Whereas this year there's 7, I think, 6 or 7 hat tricks. And it is the type of strikers, I think, that Dave, or it is the type of players I think that David mentioned. Your Tony Cotte's, your Kevin Campbell's, guys like that who would thrive on people like Lee Sharpe's wide play and getting the ball into the box. So that is still prevalent. Some of those players get 2 hat tricks this season. Efan Okoku, I think, for Norwich in his debut season gets 4 in that game coming up as well. So yeah, that just struck out to me, that whole point about Lee Sharpe, Giggs, Kanchelskis coming, Beckham coming later on. It's really going to be interesting to look at how those goals were created, because I don't think it's as simple as just balls into the box and we've got really good headers, because you've got guys like Tony Cottee in there who that wasn't necessarily their game. But yeah, it's fascinating to trail that back. I mentioned earlier on about United and how it can seem like a procession. I think you outlined that it's very much not. Even though they will be top from August onwards, essentially, there's obviously a lot more to it than that, and it is a really tricky start for them, especially when you look at the game that's coming up as well. There's a lot in there for them, and they navigate it well. We're not anywhere near the stage of Man United's really rampaging through the Christmas period, if you like, and then becoming, but by spring they're kind of ready to go. I don't think we're quite there yet, but you can certainly see the peaks and troughs in this season in particular that will come into play in next ones.
There was a defeat at Stamford Bridge. Gavin Peacock. We'll come back to this because there's a lot made of Chelsea's hoodoo and the mark that they held over United this season in the very last game of it.
Up
But,
the cup final, yeah.
Yeah, to no avail. Which meant that the game on, I think, 19th of September, Super Sunday at Old Trafford between Manchester United and Arsenal, who had recovered from Mickey Quinn's demolition, David, and re-established themselves, kept everything cool, and arrived at Old Trafford level on points in second place, only behind in goal difference. But they had something going up front with Ian Wright and Kevin Campbell. Goals starting to flow, and there was a lot expected of this game.
Yeah, there was. And there are things I think people will recognise from your classic era, Manchester United, Arsenal, the Wenger Fergie era. This is a really competitive game in terms of commitment. There's an edge. There's aggro. And clearly, if anyone thinks that Manchester United and Arsenal were besties up until Arsene Wenger pitched up, they really were not. And watching this game will let you know it. Arsenal had the very conventional and something very close to my heart front pairing of the target man and the smaller, more mobile striker next to him in Ian Wright. Kevin Campbell is an underrated player, and I think if you ask Everton fans in particular, Kevin Campbell saved Everton's Premier League status in 1999 single-handedly when he came in on loan. He did. I'm looking forward to talking about that when we get there. But he was, at Arsenal, it's a lot of pressure for a young lad at the club at the time, and injury and whatnot, loss of form, and he ends up going out. Plus, I think Arsenal latter stage of his time there are transferring into the Wenger model and the Wenger side, and he doesn't fit that anymore. You wouldn't call him a throwback at this point because, as we say, the league is replete with them. Wright was such an incredible finisher. I mean, he really was, but he was not a poacher in the sense of just standing in the box. And then there's more to it than that, even for, Tony Cottee was mentioned there. Tony Cottee was absolutely brilliant, but he was what, he might be termed a goal hanger. Ian Wright's movement is first class. I mean, genuinely, even to go all Ray Wilkins on you, if there are any young lads watching, go and watch Ian Wright, because the movement is absolutely superb. But these are two sides who have got real physical edges throughout their teams. They've got guys who are no stranger to leaving one on the opposition in both sides. They've got guys who will battle like hell at set pieces. And in the end, it comes down to a moment of quality from a guy who has the star quality that the Premier League was after. And Cantona, not for the first time this season, not for the last, pops up with an absolutely crucial goal. And I remember this, it was a real heavyweight contest, Martin. It's the kind of game you like, where it's maybe not a basketball match, it's maybe not a chance every minute or two, but you couldn't take your eyes off it because the tension, because the stakes in it are so high. Some of the tackles now, that game now ends up 9v9 minimum. And but the idea, as I say, that the Wenger thing was the thing that kicked it off. These are two sides who really don't like each other. And
it goes back to the early 80s.
The Brawl game.
I think they played it maybe about 4 or 5 times for a variety of reasons, and there was an FA Cup semi-final at Villa Park, and I don't know, 83 maybe, that got quite tasty. And it's bubbled under. They had the big one in 91, and
stick your 2 points up your arse game. Yeah, but the other thing about it is that again, and this is us, overlaying meaning once we've got the benefit of hindsight, but I feel comfortable enough doing that, and I beg the indulgence of the listener on it. But these are two enormous clubs who haven't won as much, anywhere close to as much. They've still been winning things, but not anywhere near as much as they feel they should. And they both sense that here we are in a new decade, a new era, and Liverpool for the first time in 35 years, don't look as though they are having a blip. There is a sense that being the club of the 90s, being the dominant side, is there for one of those clubs. It's not, you'll get good sides, but they'll break up in a year or two. Norwich, it's a case in point. The people come in and look at it. Arsenal are big enough that if they can dominate, they can win 5 or 6 titles over 10 years. Manchester United certainly feel they are big enough to do that. And I think that sense of finally the gap is there. The world number one has moved out. He's got his own problems. And it's there for one of us. And I think it permeates the game throughout this era.
It's some strike by Cantona, of course.
Yeah.
But Arsenal are affected by it because, as I said, they turn up their level on points. They win 3 out the next 13 games after that.
4 draws in the spin coming up. Yeah. See, just before we move off of Arsenal, can we give that Ian Wright goal against Everton? It's flowers. He gets 2 that day, but it's the one long. I mean, David summed it up there in terms of the dynamic between the two strikers, and I think this sums it up as well. Big kick from Seaman, who obviously was great at that. Kevin Campbell goes for the ball, doesn't get there obviously, but drags the defender, and the finish the setup play for me and Wright is brilliant. He almost tries to go past the defender, but jinks himself and then lobs Neville Southall from 18, 20 yards. It's just incredible. It's like the most direct football imaginable, and then just this absolute class.
A moment of absolute genius. Here's one for you, Martin. Right, you put me and Adam on the spot often enough. Why did Ian Wright not transfer that to international level? Because he scored goals in Europe, right? So it's not, he's a Premier League guy. He scored goals in Europe for Arsenal. Big goals, big important goals against good sides. But for some reason, I just never... He should have had 100 caps and 6. He should have been the Harry Kane that era. Is it just a competition? Is it the fact you've got so many of these guys?
I think there's a few things, and we will get into the competition, which isn't anywhere near where it's going to get, but it's starting to. We're going to look at Andy Cole in a few moments. He's quite insecure. He effectively got rid of Bruce Rioch again a few years down the road, but Rioch correctly said we're too dependent on him, and he's kind of on the way out, which he kind of was. He was still a bit of a swan song under early Wenger, but he wasn't this. He wasn't the striker you're describing there, and had been in that FA Cup final first game against Manchester United, and that utterly lightning reaction and pace and power and everything else. And he took real umbrage to that, rather than taking the professional challenge on and maybe adapting game, which he kind of had to do with Dennis Bergkamp, admittedly easier. So he probably had a bit of that insecurity in the back of his mind. Started late, was very aware that he started late, famously, in his career. And possibly, David, just wanted it too much whenever he did get that opportunity. And you're looking around, you're talking that mid-90s of Alan Shearer, Teddy Sheringham, Andy Cole, Les Ferdinand's coming through at QPR. Chris Sutton is ripping up trees at Norwich and then Blackburn. And for all of these guys, fucking hell, Robbie Fowler is also coming through this season as well. I imagine for a lot of these guys who aren't called Alan Shearer, who eventually gets told, famously, you're playing at Euro 96.
Yeah, regardless.
He didn't score for ages. But Venables was like, no, you're starting that tournament. For these guys, there must be a kind of pressure and tension.
I kind of take the point. I take the point about later. I really do. But I mean, he scores 25 goals for Palace
Yeah.
1990, and then I think he scores. Is it the next the next 7 seasons or something? He breaks the 30 goal club barrier every year. So I get later on, I do, but like Euro 1990, when is it Graham Taylor, isn't it? Nigel
92,
Clough,
yeah.
Paul
92,
Stewart,
yeah.
David Hurst, Brian Dean are all getting minutes ahead of him. I'd be really interested to know what that is about, because that's when he's at his peak, I would say, certainly the early 90s for sure. So I'd be interested to know, because obviously it doesn't make Euro 92. You've got Lineker still there, fair enough. You've got Shearer, Alan Smith. Yeah,
But he played with Alan Smith, so you would think that's an advantage.
So,
And maybe
this is the thing
maybe
about
I'm
international
looking at it.
football, though. It's not, and it never, well, it shouldn't be. And those squads are smaller slightly, so you're probably only taking 4 forwards. You're not just taking your best 4 forwards. Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker and Ian Wright are the same kind of. Alan Smith is probably going to play, or something like Alan Smith is going to be that foil. So he's just behind there. There is a psychological conversation to be had about players who rip everything up at their club and just can't make that leap. It's too different. They're not the main man. They're not. The whole thing isn't centered around them. They don't feel comfortable. They're under pressure. Whatever it is, they just kind of crumble again. I think he just wanted it too much. How devastated he was to miss out on France '98, Adam, which is way past, as you say, kind of his peak. But he was good in a different way in Rome in that qualifier, although missed a good chance, I think. But he would have gone, but he was injured, and that he just I just think wanted it too much, and that's maybe another podcast.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how you get this now, and we look back, even Scotland players and things, and you look back and it's so and so only got 12 caps for Scotland in the 70s and 80s, and they're terrific. It's funny, it just doesn't happen now. I mean, obviously there's more games, which is one thing, but it's very rare that somebody is smashing it at the top end of their league nowadays, and they don't get a look in internationally. That's something that's kind of died out a little bit, and I don't necessarily think it's to do with quality. Maybe it's to do with squad size, like you mentioned. Smaller squads, less games meant that you were probably more inclined to, or less inclined to experiment, shall we say? And if you don't experiment, you might not get anything. But that's an interesting one. I can't off the top of my head think about players in the top divisions, top 5 leagues or so, at the top end of those leagues, that are consistently playing really well and get overlooked for international duty outside of anything other than like disciplinary or anything like that. It's it seems like a very obvious time thing.
I think it's games, Adam. I think you're absolutely right. International managers have far bigger palette now on which to throw different things into the mix. And I think back then it was, no, here's my team. I don't have time to fuck about. Graham Taylor, quite a conservative manager anyway, probably, and feeling the pressure absolutely, would have had a very clear idea in mind, and that's that. But United starting very, very well, scoring lots of goals, and Roy Keane as well coming to the fore with a few in those early games, which again is a big thing. Big price tag, as discussed last week, and very much doing the biz. So they are doing very well. Arsenal, as we said, derailed by that defeat, and really out of that title conversation over the next 13, 14 weeks. They would recover in the latter half of the season, but that's pretty much them out of it. They will have, however, some glory to come. After the break, we'll get to Andy Cole, Newcastle, and some fisticuffs at Goodison. All right, so Newcastle United, one of the 3 promoted sides, and a striker, Adam, that you mentioned they got from Bristol City, somehow ahead of other teams who probably should have been having a look at him. And Andy Cole once he starts, I mean, he barely stops. Newcastle had a tricky start to the campaign, lost their first 2 games. They got a point at Old Trafford. Cole gets the point at Old Trafford, and then I think it's fair to say they very much kick on. They go unbeaten until October, but his goals, Adam, are just insane. I think he's got 10 and 11. I make it. It might be 1 or 2 out. But this, when you're a promoted team, you need something like this. You need a guy that the team can rely on, but the fans get excited about. You can definitely tell that feeling. They love a Messiah, obviously there, but he was very much filling that boots until later on in the story when he turns out a bit of a naughty boy. But at this moment in time, he's just so golden.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, isn't he? Later on with the whole "call me Andrew" shtick. Yeah, I think Keegan sort of summed it up in the preseason of this year, where he said if everyone gives him a chance, Andy Cole could be the answer to our dreams in this country. And I think that was quite prescient. I think obviously Keegan, being Keegan, liked a statement. I think we'll see that coming in years to come. But yeah, I think getting off to a flyer is so huge. Obviously, we mentioned the tail end of last season where he came in and he scored lots of goals, albeit in the division before. But I think it's the signing of Beardsley for me that makes this. I think Keegan actually said, I read something in 442 the other day where he said, I'm going to sign a player just for you when he brought in Peter Beardsley, because, I mean, Peter Beardsley's well over 30 by now. It's a lot of money getting spent on him at this age. Obviously, they've got the hometown club link and all that sort of stuff, but what a partnership together. We spoke about maybe more traditional partnerships, for want of a better phrase. This one isn't one. I don't think I would peg this even now. Like Peter Beardsley and Andy Cole as a kind of strike partnership. It's not quite even as modern for the time as maybe your Cantona and Hughes is. So it's a really fascinating one, and I think the pace that Cole gave, the awareness off the ball, all that sort of stuff, for me is just incredible. He was one of those players that I would imagine Keegan would have played well with as well, and maybe that was part of it. I don't know. I'm keen to get your guys' thoughts, but maybe that's, we talk about those managers who can't do it because the players that they've got can't do what they can do. I wonder if this is us seeing it in the positive version of that, where I know exactly how to play him because I would be the person giving him the ball. Therefore, I know who I need to do that, and Beardsley is that guy. So I think he was just razor sharp. I mean, he was, for me, the most exciting player in this calendar year, if not this full season for sure. I liked how modern he was. He was strong. I don't think he certainly wasn't. He wasn't a skinny guy. He would probably be stronger than you would have thought. But yeah, I just thought the pace, the off the ball running, and just the goals. Every type of goal. It's not as if we're speaking about Mickey Quinn or anything like that, and it's going to be a specific type of goal you're scoring. Just so many in his locker. And yeah, I thought he was fantastic. And there's maybe, again, I'd be keen to get your thoughts. Maybe a little parallel there with Wright in terms of doing what he does at a certain point in time with a club that suited him, with a environment that he's good at. Obviously, he'd go on and do very well at Man United as well, but more the sort of England aspect of it. For me, again, someone who could have been and never did quite become the answer that I think people thought. But yeah, terrific season. Summed up Newcastle. I think that Beardsley-Cole partnership was the crowning jewel for them, and you can sort of see Keegan's logic in terms of how he played it. So yeah, really terrific start for Cole this season, and we're going and score a lot.
Davey, I was going to actually ask that same question that Adam's put, that there's something of the right in England with Cole as well. I think these guys just need to be
loved,
assured and loved,
managed,
and putting that. But
Yeah.
34 league goals and 40 league appearances in his first season in the Premiership with a promoted team. Now, a genuine
with
promoted
money,
team, a team that was ready for that challenge, absolutely. But it was sensational.
It really was, because he'd only arrived at Newcastle right on deadline day as a sort of, a last push for promotion, where he gets 12 and 11 for them. So he kind of come to our attention, if you like, beforehand. I'll be honest, this is before the days when Sky showed all the divisions, so I didn't see much of him in his Bristol days. But you noticed that because there was so much attention on Newcastle. Anyway, huge club, and Keegan we spoke about last week. So this guy's 12 and 11, wow. And then they signed Peter Beardsley, we mentioned last week that seemed to fit. And how will they get on? And I did think, I can see that, because he reminded me a bit of Lineker, Andy Cole. I think he was a more modern iteration of Lineker. But I remembered how well Beardsley and Lineker had partnered for England. I thought that will be interesting. They get 65 league goals between the two of them. Beardsley gets 24. They get 65 goals across the season. Beardsley gets 24. Cole's entire record for the season is 41 goals in 46 appearances in his first season in the Premier League. His first season in top division football, full stop, coming on the back of 12 and 11. This guy was a Haaland-esque phenomenon at this point. We had not seen numbers like that. These were Ian Rush numbers. That's the nearest comparison I could do. Had he come up and got 20, we'd have been going, that's pretty good. But to come up and get the amount of goals that he got, and the types of them, again, he had his signature goal. He absolutely did. Slipped through by Beardsley, found space, finish. He did, right? And there are a few of them. But there are headers, there are tap-ins, there are howitzers, there are back post runs, there are front post runs. He was deadly. And I think that because of the personality he didn't do interviews with the TV. A bit like Paul Scholes, he just didn't want to. Nervousness, really. I mean, I think sometimes people can put it down to negative reasons, it's arrogance, or whatever. But it's not, it's shyness. And Andy Cole, I think, even when you've seen him do his punditry work, like Paul Scholes is a bit more hard to figure out because he's obviously a very gregarious guy and whatnot. Andy Cole is a quiet guy and quite a complex guy. And I think you're absolutely right, Martin. He needed managed by big personalities, confident personalities, guys who knew that they had the run of the club. If you look at his most successful spells, he was working with people who could confidently assert and could dictate the entire mood of the club. Keegan at Newcastle, Ferguson at Manchester United. And he's not going to get that at England. And then we factor in the competition that we mentioned earlier. He just never looked happy, I thought, in an England shirt, to be honest. He just didn't look settled. And he had to be settled, I think. But the form he showed this year was incredible. The goals Newcastle score this year, they get over 80 in their first season back in the Premier League. It's phenomenal. But the Beardsley, the Beardsley and Cole partnership was wonderful because he was already brilliant, right? We know that the potential was there. But you mentioned there Keegan telling him, listen to what, go away and work with Peter. And Beardsley's advice on where to be, when to start your run, how to avoid being offside. There's a lot of teams that play an offside trap back in this era. Where to find yourself. It's that he improves. He continually improves. I think he improves at Manchester United as well. I really do, because he was coachable. He took instruction well. Had to be delivered in the right way. But if it was, he would take it on board. This season, honestly, I mean, I keep going back to it. Haaland, that's what it was like, where he was putting up numbers that were outrageous. Ian Rush at his peak, and he built up to this, was hitting these numbers. But he built up to it, and he was in by far and away the best team in the world. That's not to denigrate Ian Rush. I'm just saying, though, he had that advantage in the way that Haaland does. Andy Cole was playing for a promoted side, and was just absolutely remarkable. And another thing about Andy Cole, incidentally, that doesn't ever get mentioned, Martin, is for a striker who was pacey, and plays in that difficult up front role where you take a bit of punishment, remarkably durable as well. He plays. He's not a guy that got rotated. And even at United, he started a hell of a lot more than, and he was rarely injured. But this season, he exploded onto the Premier League. And everyone loved this Newcastle side. As I say, we were kind of set up to anyway. It was Keegan. That was intriguing. That was romantic. He's back at the club where they've made him a god. Beardsley's there. That's great. There were a couple of young Geordies in the side as well. There's Lee Clark. There's Steve Howie that are coming through and impressing this season. But he was a star. He was absolutely the star.
See, the personality-wise from him, I'm quite interested to know what you guys think. I think he was at Arsenal as a youth. I think he played once or twice for them, and George Graham, I don't think was a massive fan. He doesn't really strike me as a George Graham type of person, but personality-wise, I wonder what he would be seen like now, because I think a lot of people sort of see him as, Jimmy Hill said he would never make it as a footballer when he went to Fulham on loan from Arsenal. There's a big interview in 442, which I'd recommend people reading. It's really insightful about it. But he basically said, you think you're a bit of a player, don't you? Whereas I don't think you're ever going to be a player. And he was like, sort of dealt with it in the same way that he dealt with George Graham. He's like, that's your opinion. You're not going to tell me what I am and what I'm not. So it's one of those things where, is it an arrogance or is it just responding to people that are, I don't know, like not being fair? But there are a few interesting points. He fell out with Keegan in this season. I think in October, wasn't there? There was a bit of a falling out, and he gets back to they make it up. But there's a really good story which I'll just tell just now. But one of the questions on this interview, it says, a mad Newcastle fan got a tattoo of you on his leg just before you signed for Man United. Did he ever get in touch asking for his money back? Seriously though, what was it like to be in a football mad city like Newcastle? And he said he never got in touch, blah, blah, blah. But the next bit, I think, is quite insightful. He said, I enjoyed it in Newcastle, but it was difficult playing there. I was a young man, struggled to deal with the level of adoration. I just wanted to play football, go home, and go out with my mates. When I went out, some punters would say, well done, that was fine. Others wanted to hold court with you. I could be having a meal with my missus and people would come up and want to get involved in the conversation. It did my fruit in. Loved my football at Newcastle, but I felt trapped. The more goals I scored, the worse it got. The milkman to the bloke in the paper shop, everybody wanted to talk football. It's quite an interesting one. He's almost like he maybe suits more being in a big city with lots of bigger clubs if he doesn't want that kind of adulation. But that to me is that would be one of the best parts of it being a Newcastle player. I think that it's just so, when it's good, it's good. It's just a one-city club. Yeah, we absolutely love it.
It maybe would be at the start. I've always wondered about that. Not being able to walk down the street with people staring at you. Football still, I think, is uncomfortable with people who are quiet for whatever reason. Football is uncomfortable with people who don't want to get involved in bants, don't want to get involved in the dressing room horseplay, that are maybe serious, and my personality is different to that. But you get people who they're not aggressive or nasty or dour or anything. They're just quiet and they just, want to be left alone and to get on with what they're doing. Andy Cole was very guarded, I think. He's always come across like that. He values his privacy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Newcastle is absolutely the worst city in the world to be there if you're like that, because the people are so gregarious and the people are so outgoing and fun-loving, and you're going to get that. But you do get players. I mean, we from Glasgow, we know what the Goldfish Bowl was like up here. And I've heard former Old Firm players saying, great, amazing at the club, but I couldn't go to the supermarket without being mobbed. It was like Beatlemania. And they've moved to clubs in England, smaller clubs. Obviously, it's a bigger, richer league, but they like that they can just go about their business. They'll maybe get recognised by two people, on a Saturday in Southampton. It's not this thing. You're not going to get that in Newcastle. It's slightly different actually in Manchester as well, because in Manchester, the people are again very gregarious, but there's a harder edge to them, I would say. And so they're going to come up to you, and it might not necessarily be as complimentary. The Geordies are going to come up and fate you. I'm not sure that in Manchester that always holds true, but Manchester, I think, was used to having separate bits for players. There wasn't that interaction. There were velvet ropes, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And there was space for players to exist in. But yeah, Martin, I don't know what you feel about this, but I've just always got the sense that football in England struggles with players who don't fit into a very kind of specific and well-worn trope of personality. And Cole was like that. And of course, then because they don't understand it and don't go, quiet guy, leave him alone, great footballer, enjoy him for what he is, they find a negative for it. So it's like, he's arrogant, he's difficult. That's a word that gets thrown out. He's difficult. It's like, he's not difficult. He just doesn't want to get involved in the stuff that maybe is considered normal, in air quotes.
It's a country that values team spirit in both senses of the word, perhaps, and how they foster that spirit. So the lads, and that dressing room and footballers, when interviewed, going down a particular route and cliches and whatever else. So I think you're right. Quieter ones not trusted. Anyone who reads, not particularly trusted.
Like Graham Lasso, because he bought the wrong newspapers for the dressing room.
Maybe there's. Maybe I'm clutching at something, but Steve Archibald, maybe 10 years before, a very different time, but I think the same kind of personality, quite quiet, a loner. When Venables wanted him at Barcelona, he'd be speaking to Spurs players. What do you want Archibald for? He doesn't talk. And I think Archibald's got an incredible quote about team spirit as something that's viewed through the prism of success. I mean, it's a bit of a mirage, really. So yeah, not trusted is probably it. There to do a job also, by the way. And this is where fans don't really trust, or there's a tension. What do you mean this is just a job? I would kill to do what you do.
What do you mean you're not one of us?
Good, yeah, as good as you do it. And therefore, when I'm showered and I'm out, that's over. I don't follow you about after you come out the factory. So it's there's a lot in that. But yeah, great numbers for Cole, great numbers for Alan Shearer, which we'll touch on as this season develops. Not quite as spectacular in the pure numerical value. However, 18 goals in 34 games for an 18-year-old is fair going as well in the debut season. That's, of course, Robbie Fowler at Liverpool, which we will touch on as we go as well. But Liverpool, after that wonderful start, lost at home to Spurs, got back on the horse a little bit at home to Leeds, then had a run of games that just knocked them out of any contention, really. They lost to Coventry. Phil Babb scored. He would, of course, be of that parish not too far into the future. They lost at home to Blackburn Rovers. Mike Newell, who stood on those terraces before, a great goal, actually, a superb goal. And then the derby, David, at Goodison. Mark Ward, a name that, fair to say, probably has faded into football history, put Everton ahead. Tony Cottee with a kind of 5-a-side goal, really, in the second half, made it 2-0. But that first goal comes from a corner. The ball comes out and Ward just blasts it home, and super wonderful. Steve McManaman is daydreaming when that corner's played in and basically allows it to get there. And Bruce Grobbelaar nearly takes his head off verbally, and then with due force, and there's a proper fight on the pitch, and Grobbelaar maybe raging against the dying of the light, perhaps, and this young thing not being diligent enough, not being professional enough, blah blah blah. But this really is Liverpool season unraveling. We'll pick up the absolute final days of Graham Souness's time as manager there probably next week. But it's very visible, isn't it? It's a visible show of disintegration.
Yeah, it is. And again, the old and the new, isn't it? The shut up granddad comment, kind of thing. And, whereas, of course, Grobbelaar is like, I am a Liverpool legend. Why are you cheeking me? And he's in the wrong. McManaman, that's the thing. He was asleep at it in a derby game. The atmosphere at this derby, by the way, is ferocious. There's a booking inside the first 10 minutes. That never happens in this era. You basically have to bring out an open razor to get that. You mentioned Mark Ward there, Martin. Very talented player. People might remember him from his time at West Ham in the late 80s. With an excellent side under John Lyall. Went to Man City and then ended up at Everton, but struggled with consistency. The reason that a lot of you watching this are going, Mark Ward, how do I know that name? Is that he was jailed after he stopped playing in 2005 for intent to supply cocaine. He was sentenced to 8 years and he did 4 in it. And the specials never got together to write a song about him because he was not jailed unfairly. He was not an innocent man in jail. And that's maybe why he spoke a lot about resentment, Martin, of just missing out on the big money. He kind of spoke about his career was literally just before he would have been making some good money because there's some big transfer fees in there, quality player. And then another former West Ham man, of course, Tony Cottee, pops up with a goal towards the end, that rarest of things as it would become, an Everton victory in the derby. But Liverpool are a mess, and it's the old iceberg thing again. The opening games, things are looking decent, but as soon as any pressure gets applied, they fall apart. Something awful. The fans hate Souness by this stage. The Sun interview, he's been accepted back in by them in recent years after, admitting the worst mistake of his life, he called it. Still baffling that he made it to this day. And he will never be viewed in the same way as a Dalglish or a Hansen at Anfield because of that. But the players don't particularly like him either. And you've got the players still there that he was teammates with. Grobbelaar, Ronnie Whelan is still there at this stage. And you've got his new guys that he's brought in. We mentioned last week, they didn't feel right. They didn't feel like it. And this is a massive culture clash between your old school Liverpool guys who are looking at people like Ruddock and later on at Julian Dix and saying, who are these guys? They wouldn't have got near our team years before. Why are we doing this? And you've got Souness, who is incredibly single-minded at this stage in particular. I mean, he always has been, he still is, but even more so in this era. He is not going to be deviated if he thinks he's got a plan. And he will, he's not going to soothe anyone's, it's my way or the highway, come along with me or go. And suddenly this Liverpool team just looks an absolute mess. This was not overnight. They'd been a mess the season before. I think there was a suspicion, though, that the previous year had been a blip. Now it's not a blip. This is just who they are. And once negativity engulfs the club, this is a fan base who have not gone through this for 35 years. The anger from them grows and is huge and is palpable. I remember Barry Grant in Brookside at the time saying he wouldn't be back to Anfield till Souness had gone. And it doesn't get more scoused than that. And you've got Clough, who's a lovely young man. And he's looking around going, what the hell am I in here? And you can see it. You've got Ruddock, who I think underneath the bravado and the persona, you mentioned the word insecurity early, Martin. He's insecure about his place there because he knows that there are players there that don't fancy him. And I think there's also this sense among a lot of the younger guys that they're getting chucked into this environment because Souness is falling out with senior players. So these young lads are being chucked in. The fans don't want to see them there. It's only the manager, and they're getting lost in the morass, and it's like a snowball running down the hill. It just picks up momentum, and it picks up size, and it gets worse and worse and worse throughout this season. There are good players there, but they are playing well within themselves. They're scared to make a mistake. There are reactions going round Anfield, because even in the good years at Liverpool, there wasn't booing when they lost a game because it was so rare and they knew they'd be back the following week. It didn't happen. It's not like at some clubs, you can be 4-0 up and you misplace a pass, you get booed. They weren't like that. There was almost a sense of serenity to them because they won so much. And you have to remember at this stage, Martin, there are people in their 30s who don't know anything else than Liverpool being utterly dominant. And now they're having to watch this, and they're having to watch a manager that it seems to be making it worse deliberately by ripping up everything that's made the club successful. Now, Souness was right. They had to evolve. But the problem is Souness is not an evolved guy. Souness is a completely, let's just chuck a bomb in there and then I'll rebuild from scratch. And it doesn't work.
Couple of quick hits in, guys, before we finish off. Adam, Newcastle go to Southampton in late October. Yes. Relegation threatened Southampton. Andy Cole scores. He hits the bar as well. He probably should have scored with another header. That is in between, however, two of the most famous goals certainly of this season, possibly of any Premier League game, and they're both from Matt Letissier, brought back. I don't think he'd been dropped for a few games by Ian Brandfoot. Gets brought back in here because they're in a bit of bother, and he goes off on a run himself. He's going to have a good goal scoring season, as it turns out. But these are two sublime goals. A guy playing a different game than the other 21 players, I think.
Yeah, I can't pick what my favourite is, to be honest. I feel like the first one has got more to it, but the second one's just, if that wasn't someone like Matt Letissier, you'd say he's not meant that. He's just hits it. But Jesus, it's incredible. The first one was a really good quote. He says, "The knockdown came from Ian Dowie, so it could have went anywhere. So I had to be prepared for it." And I think you see that where the first touch that he takes, he almost has to. It's too far behind him, and he has to clip it with his foot. Just sensational. I think Ian Brandfoot wasn't very popular at all. I think he got dropped him for Paul Moody because Mark Letissier didn't work hard enough. Like, okay, you're missing the point a little bit there, I think, in terms of the type of player that he has. Yeah, I thought I'd be quite keen to get your thoughts on this, Martin, because he's one of those guys that I think wasn't that bored about winning things. Really, Letissier could have been a lot more than he was. So I don't know whether is that a negative on someone's character, like at this point, that he could have went to one of the big clubs. He was fighting relegation for most of his time at Southampton. He still scored a barrel of goals, but maybe he just suited being that big fish in a small pond. Maybe he liked being the man. But again, I think we probably remember the good bits, but there would have been games where he just sort of nothing really happened and he didn't have any pressure on him and he could just turn it on whenever he likes. So I'm interested in the thoughts on that, because he probably summed up some of the worst sides of English football there in terms of maybe so much talent, but application wasn't there at times, or maybe it was just he was just quite happy. He missed the point. We're missing the point of what Matt Letissier was. It was just Southampton's best player at that time, scoring lots of goals, being the man there, but ultimately didn't really feel the need to push himself on. But some sensational goals throughout his time, and these two were right up there.
A lot to be said for happiness.
Yeah.
And being happy, knowing yourself, knowing what you want, what you don't want. And everyone else's opinion can go hang, I guess. It's a team sport. It's about winning. It's about going somewhere where you can display your talents, express yourselves, but in a way that leads to something. In my opinion, as reductive as that may be, that is the point of the sport after all. So he was a player that frustrated me that he wasn't walking away with medals because his talent was superb. In retrospect, where he could go realistically is probably a wider discussion. United don't need it. Let's say, okay, so Southampton, they're going to survive. Let's say he goes in the summer of '94. Where does he go? He's not going to go to United.
Chelsea.
Sheringham.
Chelsea. Yeah. They'd go to, and at the time they are
fall out with the manager.
Fall out with the manager, not work hard enough, score a couple of belters, and see if you are supremely talented and you never have to work hard, then sometimes you do not learn or ever engage the capacity to do it, because Letissier is one of these guys who was the best player in his primary school team, best player in his regional schools team, best player in the youth team, best player, and any time he's getting hassle from a manager, he's going to at one point turn around, beat three men and stick a 30-yarder in outrageously and turn around as he done here and give the manager the V sign and get on with it. And I think that people who are like that, who are gifted in that sense, it's only the truly exceptional ones of them who do go to the very, very top, because they do not try to squeeze out every last piece of ability that they have. Yeah. Matt Letissier was born with more talent than, say, Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I'm not saying Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't born with any talent. That's not. But he worked on absolutely every facet. He wants every single goal, every award, every medal that he can get. And he has made sure he's got the best out of it. If you get someone like Jude Bellingham, incredible natural talent, but look at the physical work he does. Look at the drive, the want to be the best and to win things. Matt Letissier was never bothered with that because he knew how good he was, and he knew in himself how good he was. He didn't need that external validation that came from this. And something that we've spoken a bit tonight about personality and the human side of footballers, something I think we do not talk anyone near enough about is they are human beings and sometimes they're just happy. And Matt Letissier liked where he lived. It's a nice place, Southampton. It's warm. He was from Guernsey, so down from there as well. And he was just content and satisfied. And that sort of internal satisfaction, in a way, I almost think that the top footballers have to be missing something inside that they need to fill up with goals and medals and awards. He wasn't like that. He isn't like that. He's supremely, the stuff he says now, you have to be supremely confident in yourself to do that, because you're going to be ridiculed and most people don't care for that. So I think that's what it was. But also Adam nailed a point there. Youngsters now watch videos on YouTube or whatever of them, and they see the goals and they go, my God, why wasn't that guy, at the top club? And it's like, because of the other 89 minutes.
Yeah.
And football is evolving.
And I think Chelsea's probably but Chelsea's not a huge upgrade on Southampton at this moment in time. That's
not in football sense, but money wise and living in London, that would attract some people.
You would have interested me in Keegan's team.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
He doesn't work hard anywhere near hard enough.
Look at Beardsley's work rate. Beardsley never stops.
Doesn't work hard enough for Dalglish's Blackburn. He's not going to fit.
I don't think he works hard enough for Newcastle.
I was just about to say there, I could have seen Arsenal purely on the basis of working with Ian Wright in that sense. I could have seen, okay, there's something quite interesting there, but absolutely zero chance for the manager or
no, he's
anything else.
not going to wear him. I think
in terms of
Sheffield
that,
Wednesday, I always thought in this period, I thought Wednesday, he could work in there. They're a big-ish club at this point. Expectations, but still the fans are going to revere him in the way that Southampton fans do. It was described to me by a friend who supports a smaller club than I do, and he said, if we have a player who does an amazing thing, twice a game, that'll do for us, because we don't get to see many amazing things. But because you've grown up watching a lot of amazing things, you then go, well, I know you did that last week. What have you done for me today? It's just a different mindset. And I think he almost had a level, because he wouldn't go, and he was not going to listen to a manager. He was not going to, right, I'll work harder. Some of his conditioning in his time, people forget this as well. There are spells in his Southampton career where he's not quite Mickey Quinn, but he looks as though he was keeping him company.
He's talked about his fast food thing, right? I mean, again, he's chicken nuggets and whatever else. So yeah, it's not going to wash. And there are other clubs who could earn more money, but the question that has always been, where does he get the medals? And I'm not sure that the medal winning or medal challenging clubs need him or would find them a place to fit. So so much for a quick hit. This one has to be David. Norwich City, we talked about. We'll come back very, very briefly. They go to Everton and they utterly eviscerate them. And Efan Akoku, I think, scores 4 in a 5-1 win. And not long after that, they have their night in Munich where they beat Bayern 2-1. They draw 1-1 at home, and they go through to the next round of the UEFA Cup. We'll maybe pick that story up next week. But possibly approaching the high point, and Jeremy Goss's volley as a fitting way to reach their particular summit at this point, because that team's going to break up soon.
Yeah, and this is, the Munich is as good as it's ever going to get for Norwich City, and I mean they're still up and down now. They're a side who can always have Premier League ambitions, but the side was getting eyed up. The manager's getting eyed up. It's the end of things. It's that thing for a team in that position. Don't do too well, because if you do too well, it's all going to end soon. And then, as we'll learn as we go through this, don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it turns out Mike Walker was one of those managers who was very good at a specific place at a specific time and didn't have transferable skills. Sutton goes on and does very, very well at Blackburn, for example. Jeremy Goss I loved, because we spoke here about to go right back to the start, the shifting of the eras and the change. He has got a mullet. He's balding and he's got a mullet. Now, that is not a look that you can carry much longer into the 90s without children pointing at you in the street and throwing things. But he was, a guy who was just playing at a level that his career did not suggest he could play at. And there was just a little bit of magic in the air in Norfolk through this period. But, Rule Fox will end up at Newcastle, for example, and suddenly all the star parts of this side get bought up and taken away, and Norwich will, go to the place. And there is a glass ceiling for a club like Norwich, and even then it was clear. But they will always have that night where they beat Bayern Munich. And of course, Bayern Munich took that result in the fair play, thank you, for a good game. You will just better on the night way that they do by immediately sacking the manager, because that's life in Munich.
Yeah, we'll always have Munich. Aston Villa went out to Depor in the same competition. Arsenal 10-0 aggregate winners over Standard Liège. So, they're looking okay in the Cup Winners' Cup. Manchester United, the qualifier for the Champions League group stage, was against Galatasaray, and they managed to draw 3-0 at 3-3 at Old Trafford, 2-0 up after 15 minutes.
Cruising.
Found themselves 3-2 down. Cantona got an equaliser, and then welcome to hell as they went to Istanbul, and all of that 0-0 on the night, and out they went. The following weekend was the Manchester derby, and they were 2-0 down after half an hour, and with 40 minutes remaining, still 2-0 down. But they pulled it back. Cantona and Keegan involved. Keegan getting a winner 3 minutes from time. So just when there was a wee chance that United were going to start to wobble, they respond, and they finished that weekend 11 points clear at the top. This is the start of November. Surely it is plain sailing from now. We'll pick it up next week, but thank you, David.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I told you there was a lot in this season, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, there is. We can't really extend to 5 shows a season. That would be absolutely ridiculous. But we're rampaging through them. But yeah, lots more to discuss. Thank you.
Yeah, loads more to come next week, listeners. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.